Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about the Leica M8. It's been a while since my last video and you might have seen my Road to Leica video. I link it up somewhere here. And how I became a Leica photographer, Leica shooter and a Leica enthusiast. And it's all because of this little camera here, my all-time favorite camera. Well, what is the Leica M8? The Leica M8 is the first digital rangefinder from Leica. It was released in 2006 and it has a 10.3 megapixel CCD sensor with a APS-H crop format. That means it has a crop factor of 1.33. While the crop factor or the cropped sensor is a showstopper for most people because most professional photographers say that a professional camera is a full-frame one. It's not really true. I shot for years with the Fujifilm APS-C format and changed from Canon full-frame to Fujifilm back in the day. And yes, it's a huge difference between an APS-C and a standard full-frame sensor. But the APS-H sensor feels more like a full-frame one. I never had the feeling of shooting a smaller sensor, and it doesn't matter, at least to me. Like I said, this camera has a CCD sensor. That means there is no live view. It's technically not possible to include live view in a CCD sensor. It only works with CMOS sensors. And it is a camera with a lot of limitations. You have a very limited ISO range. It goes from 160 to 2400, and it's usable at 160 if you're brave enough, maybe at 320, and that's all. That's above it gets very, very grainy and not really beautiful. Another thing is this camera has no IR cut filter, so you have to screw on an IR cut filter. Looks like this, because of the color shifts the camera produces. You can see these color shifts mainly when you're taking pictures of something green. It turns a little yellowish, and black fabrics tend to have a strange purple tone on them. And there are colors this camera cannot see. For instance, I had a shooting with a purple BMW from a friend of mine, and on all pictures, on every light, the car was blue. It looked great in blue, better than purple, but it is purple, and this camera has problems seeing this color. At least when shooting cars, I don't know. Well, I took this camera everywhere for years now. This is the camera that accompanies me everywhere. Even if I'm on a professional shooting and use other gear, this camera is always with me. I use only one lens. This is the Voigtlander Nocturne Classic, the 35mm 1.4, and on the cropped sensor it becomes about 45-ish something millimeter. And it's great because it's between 50 and 35 millimeters, my favorite focal length. So I used it as a compromise to have one camera with one lens and use it for everything. I challenged myself last year and traveled with this camera only. No backup, no other camera, and I was for about 10 days or 1 week in Greece and shot everything with this camera. So you may ask yourself, how is that possible? How can you shoot everything with one camera and a single lens with such a limiting ISO range? You can work around. There's always a way to take a picture. And this is the thing I love most about this camera. It forces you to think more about your capture and the picture you're taking. And you have to find a way to work around the limitations of the camera. And I will show you some pictures later. It worked out. I even shot it at night. And there's always a way to take pictures if you want to. The great thing is that if you master the technique of taking great pictures with the M8, every other camera becomes like a toy. It's just it always works out. But the limitations are something that sound romantic or challenging to some, but I think this is the way of true learning and the way of becoming a better photographer in so many ways. But first things first, let's take a look at the camera. I talked about the sensor. On the front side, you have your frame selector. It chooses the frame automatically when you screw on the lens. And it's something nobody uses. At least I never heard of someone using it. When you got your lens on, you can choose what frame you want to look through. So maybe if you have, for instance, a 35mm on and want to see what the picture would look like with a 50mm, then you can turn this little lever here and see different frame lengths. Like I said, I don't know anybody who uses this. Here's the little button to unscrew the lens. You have your Leica dot, the rangefinder, and this little window here is to light up mechanically the frames in your viewfinder. And on top you have the on-off switch with the off, single mode, continuous mode. I don't know how many frames this takes a second, I never cared. And you have a self timer with, I think, 12 seconds or something. And yeah, your shutter speed dial, and that's all. On the back side you have the crappiest display you've ever seen on a camera, except my old Hasselblad. It is even worse, but this is fairly unusable. You can see that you took a picture and you can maybe go through your pictures and select the good ones or delete the bad ones, but you can't see really what you take. And another thing about the M8 is this camera is very, very, very slow. So if you take a picture, the buffer fills quite fast. Maybe you can take 2 or 3 or 4 pictures and then it works for a while, and it forces you to slow down. You're even slower than with the analog M6 or something. The menu is very, very small. It has just a few positions here. You can there are some JPEG settings. I honestly never shot JPEG on this camera. Oh, I did, and I really disliked the output. It's awful. And I shoot only RAW. A great thing is the files are very small. One DNG file, one picture, is about 10 megapixels. Megabytes, sorry. And I found a way to connect the camera. Obviously from 2006 it has no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or something, but there is a small USB connector here, and with a special cable you can plug in your camera to your phone and upload the DNGs directly to Lightroom, which is amazing. It's as simple as it gets, but it works out. On the downside you have your there is your battery. I have another one here. You have your battery and your SD card. You can use nearly all SD cards. I never had problems, even with the very big ones with I don't know, 256 gigabytes or something. But what I do is I use an 8 gigabyte one, because there is this little display here that shows you the battery and how many pictures you can take. And of course, if you put in a larger battery than 8 gigabytes, it's always at 999, no matter how many pictures you shoot. And with the 8 gigabyte, it always says a number here, and I like that. It's just like looking at an analog frame counter, but in digital, and I think it's very nice. It's a pity they don't put this display on the later digital M models. It's great. I really like that little gauge here. Yeah, that's about the technical side. How does it feel like to shoot the M8? Honestly, a few years ago I wrote an article for the Fuji X Passion magazine called My Initial Dream. And my initial dream when I started out photography was to have a digital camera that looks like an analog one, feels like an analog one, and take pictures that look like film. And this is exactly what this camera does. If I could change one thing, is I would remove the display completely and just put on a dial for ISO or something, and somehow find a way, or a round dial here like the Leica M-D one has, and that's all. The display is unusable, so it could be removed. And like I said, I took this camera everywhere, from the hottest beaches in Greece to the coldest mountains in Germany in the winter, and the camera performed on both sides very well, except in the winter when the temperature is under 0 degrees Celsius. Somewhere it stops working, it's just too cold for the M8. But as long as you keep your camera warm, it works out. Anyway, I really enjoyed the magic of slowing down again in photography. And there's one thing, at first, when you're used to any other camera, you could take any digital camera, it will be faster than this one. But I enjoyed the fact that I slowed down, and suddenly, when I started understanding how the M8 works, I became faster shooting the M8 than with any other camera, even with autofocus. Of course, there is no autofocus like on every Leica M model. Another little thing I really love about the M8 is there is no real leather. I don't know how this plasticky thing is called, but it's the same like on the old analog ones. For instance, the M3 and M2 models, they have the same fabric here, and it feels great. It feels exactly like an analog camera. Well, who is this camera for? I think if you're into photography, I guess you wouldn't watch my video if you weren't, but if you're into photography and you want to learn more about photography and your composition and everything, this is the right tool. I shot for years with the Canon full-frame models like the 5D or 5D Mark II, Mark III. I shot for years with the Canon R system and the Fuji X system, and they're all great cameras. But this little Leica here changed a lot. Not only because the fact of slowing down, but you create a different composition. The pictures start to look different because you see the world in a different way. One thing I experienced this summer, I traveled a few weeks ago to Greece with only the Fuji GFX 50R and documented my whole trip with this big ass medium format rangefinder style camera, and I enjoyed it. But a few days later, like I said, the M8 is always with me no matter where I go, and if it's not on my neck, it's somewhere in my bag. It's always with me. I don't leave the house without my M8. And after a week or 10 days or something, I reached for the M8 and went to the beach and went to an archaeological place there. And what I realized is the difference between a rangefinder and a conventional camera is that I don't get thrown out my scene. I see the world like I see it without a camera, and there is just a little frame there and I can take a picture. And this very organic way of taking pictures changed my photography a lot. I promise you that if you take a Leica M8, your pictures will be better and more substantial than with any other camera. And it's not because it's a Leica, it's because it's a rangefinder. And the CCD pictures have a certain structure on them. Kids are strange these days. I promise you that your pictures will be different. They have a certain structure on them, and the CCD colors, there is a hype around everything CCD-like in the meantime, but it's really that true, that colors are very special. It looks like it's a Kodak sensor, and the colors look like Kodak. It looks something between Kodachrome and Portra. And they are just amazing. You have to adjust just minor things in post and they're perfect. Another thing I really like about this little camera here is the battery life. It lasts forever. I don't know, I never counted the picture, but they're way above 2000 pictures or something. I always have the screen off, use the camera only at ISO 160 for the best quality, and a battery lasts forever. Is this the right camera for you? If you think about getting a Leica, this should be your first one. Most people go over the M8 because it's not a full frame and try the M9. I had a project years ago and thought that the M8 wouldn't be good enough for these pictures, so I upgraded to the M9 and later to the M10, and I sold my first M8 back then, and after using the M9 for, I don't know, 1 or 2 months, I bought an M8 again and sold my M9. Compared to the M9, the M8 is technically seen the worst camera, but it feels better. It feels like a more complete system, like a more, it feels exactly like an analog camera, that's it. And it feels more awake and more present. It's the shutter sound is, I would say, loud. Let's hear it. And I like the sound. It's beautiful. It's not the standard Leica sound you're used from the later models, but it sounds great, at least to me. That's it, guys. Thank you for watching. I will show you some pictures, and I'd like to know your opinion about the Leica M8, and have you tried one? How do you find it? And do you have a special camera that is special to you? Tell me in the comments. If you have questions about the M8, I will do my best to answer them. So guys, that's it. Thanks for watching, and till next time, goodbye.